I completed my second solo on Saturday, December 23rd. In this solo I completed 2 circuits, which included 1 touch and go. Unlike my first solo, I performed much better landings than my shocking number 1 solo landing. Hour 27 was also interesting for its weather. During the pre-solo check there was rain, making the solo impossible, but the rain cleared towards the end of the check, so Greg suggested I could just go ahead with the solo if I wanted, and of course I did. Today I completed my second solo, almost a week and a half after my first. This was a little unexpected because it's been over a week since my solo number 1, bad weather again, and I was concerned that my skills had regressed. But I traveled to Camden with an open mind and a goal to perform flawless circuits as much as possible, regardless of whether a solo would ensue. The weather, as always, played an important role. My flight was set for 2 p.m. I always avoid late afternoon flights because the weather at Camden becomes hostile to flight lessons, with higher winds and gusts than morning flights. But unlike in the early days, I feel more confident to deal with such conditions now. Greg was my CFI for this lesson. He would decide if my second solo was possible based on my performance and the weather. So let's see what happened. For the hour 27 flight, ATIS reported this.
Camden Confirmation Golf, runway 06, wind 040 degrees, 12 knots, visibility greater than 10 kilometres, clouds scattered 4,500, temperature 26. QNH 1009er. On first contact, Camden Tower or ground, notify receipt of golf.
The second solo is very similar to the first one, except that the student completes 2 circuits instead of just 1, and this solo includes a touch and go. And because the student does a more extended solo session, there is less time for the warm-up and the various checks like flapless approaches, engine failures, etc. So the pre-solo check consists of only 1 of each. 1 normal approach, 1 flapless approach, and 1 glide approach, and a final normal approach with a complete stop. Everything has to go well in the pre-solo check because there isn't enough time to fix anything or have a second try. And today everything went well. The first solo was about completing a single circuit. Take off, land, celebrate. The second solo is a repeat of the first solo, except that it's longer. The point of solo 2 is to practice what the student already knows, but for longer. After solo number 1, I only thought a little about solo number 2 because I was too busy with work. Even on the morning of the flight, I was preoccupied with work tasks and I almost forgot to pack my equipment, check batteries, etc., which are all the usual things that I do before a flight. Being on a Saturday also didn't help. I didn't feel any noticeable psychological stress for my first solo, even though I knew it was super important and a milestone in my journey to become a pilot. For the second solo though, I felt an ever slight amount of stress. Driving to Camden, I assessed my chances of flying solo as slight due to the weather. When I got there, the weather was still 50-50. It was raining when we started the flight, so the solo was out of the question. And then, at the end of the pre-solo check portion of the lesson, the weather cleared, and Greg gave me the green light for a solo if I wanted. At that moment, I felt a bit of stress, which only lasted for a few seconds. After I stopped the plane at the runner bay so that Greg could get off, I was back in the pilot in command mindset, which seemed to shield me from negative psychology. Greg reminded me of the task ahead: fly 2 circuits with 1 touch and go, then return to pick him up from the runner bay, and how to deal with typical contingencies, such as a go around if I'm not established to land or if the runway is occupied. Or maybe I just remembered Spock's advice. Just like in my solo number 1, the first part of this flight lesson was to go through the basic circuit patterns: normal, flapless, and glide approaches. I completed those patterns well and got the check marks from Greg. The only obstacle now was the weather. As I mentioned, this last obstacle was cleared at the last minute. There was no rain in the circuit anymore, and the rain that had fallen earlier had not impacted the runway. So when Greg gave me the green light for a solo, I took it. Let's do it. The second solo was similar to the first, but with an additional circuit. 2 circuits instead of 1. This means double the time in the air as the pilot in command.
Camden Tower, Alpha Hotel Hotel, holding point Alpha, runway 06, ready for circuits.
Alpha Hotel Hotel Tower, cleared for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, Alpha Hotel Hotel.
One touch and go allowed me to practice the procedure solo without instructor supervision. Everything I did in this second solo was a copy of the first solo, as it should be. The only variable was a slightly stronger headwind, which I didn't feel was making any real difference. I was pleased with circuit 1. I did it by the book. Good altitude and airspeed control, tight spacing, good radio calls and bumfish, and feeling good throughout. Even the landing was very good. The second circuit was almost a copy of the first one, with one exception. At the start of the downwind leg of circuit 2, for a brief moment, I reached 1500 feet. This happened while I was trimming and reducing power and preparing to radio for a complete stop. The important thing here is that I noticed this discrepancy and fixed it within a few seconds without compromising other parts of my downwind activities, radio call, bumpfish and flying downwind within the altitude and speed tolerances. Circuit 2 was also textbook, apart from the altitude issued early downwind. I did a nice landing and taxied to the runner bay to collect Greg and continued to the Bowser for refueling. My next scheduled flight lesson is for January the 3rd. My next solo will include 3 circuits with 2 touch and goes if all goes well. In addition to the 3rd circuit, I'll taxi the plane back to the hangar.
Right. Sit. Circuit to complete. Flipping up the elevators. Pressure of the front wheel.
Alpha Hotel Hotel, taxi to the bay and pick up the instructor and then taxi to parking.
Taxi to pick up my instructor and then to parking. Alpha Hotel Hotel.
If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel right now. Just click on the subscribe button below this video. And of course, you can also head over to my detailed flight training log pages on the Tech Explorations website. In these pages, I document in detail all of my experiences and learnings from each one of my training flights. These logs contain a goldmine of information for any aviation student or anyone interested in aviation. Until next time, I wish you clear skies and safe landings.